Okay, I think we are good to start. And as the others join, a very good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Thank you so much for being with us here today. And a very, very warm welcome to all of you. We are very excited for you to be with us today for a second webinar in the partnership webinar series on initiating partnerships in education. For those of you who may not know about Global Schools Forum, GSF is a catalytic community of non-state organizations, an innovation accelerator, and a partnership builder working to systemically improve education for underserved children in low and middle income countries. Since our establishment in 2017, our community has reached over 142 organizations spanning 64 countries. These organizations include standalone schools, school networks, and education support organizations. We reach 1.2 million children directly through our standalone schools, school networks, and ECE centers. And the Education Support Organization reach 101 million children through the schools they support. In our last webinar, we launched our Evidence Hub on government and non-state partnerships. That was developed as a help both governments and non-state actors understand the breadth of possible partnerships and help develop and create sustainable, impactful partnerships. The Hub is a repository of tools and resources, including toolkits, innovative case studies that include the case studies of the programs of our panelists here today, a categorization framework, and policy briefs designed to strengthen partnerships between government and non-state actors. In our panel today, we are going to explore how to initiate successful partnerships in education through the work that our panelists are doing in their respective programs. Together, we will dive into conversation with our panelists who will talk about their programs, share practical strategies for building successful partnerships, and provide insights on navigating challenges and ways to create impactful collaborations. A few housekeeping tips. The webinar is being recorded. We will be able to share a link with you after the event is over. Please do ask as many questions. All questions will be asked through the chat or the Q&A option on your screens. We will pose it to the panelists at the time of discussion towards the latter half of this session. Now, without taking any more time, I would like to introduce you to our moderator, Chirantan Shah. Chirantan is the CEO of Gyanshala, one of the pioneers of structured pedagogy in India, with a focus on providing quality education at scale to children from low-income groups. Gyanshala does this through its community learning centers and through government and low-fee private schools, impacting millions of students. Chirantan is a civil engineer and an MBA and has had a very interesting career trajectory, starting his career as a software developer, moving on to becoming a journalist, and finally working as in marketing for 7 years. His discomfort with India's socio-economic condition drew him towards primary education as an enterprise that could move society towards being more equitable, just, and ethical. Since 2018, he has been working with Gyanshala. Over to you, Chirantan.
Thanks a lot, Tejaswini. Hello, everyone from Patna, Bihar in India. Every organization that works on improving the quality of primary education, that believes that it has a solution that can solve a problem, that wants that solution to be tried at scale, has to work with the government system. And yet, so many times, the government collaboration projects for non-state actors that start off with so much promise fizzle away, either because of the complexity of the contract, the disagreement in terms of delivery, the program not being accepted by some component of the government system, the program getting reduced to its bare elements as it gets scaled, and we do away with all the factors that actually made it tick. But on a few occasions, some collaborations with the government do see the light of the day. And today we have the leadership team from 3 such organizations, who over the next 50 minutes are going to talk to us about their experience in setting up and sustaining government partnerships and their insights on effective strategies for establishing and nurturing partnerships with the government in the education system. Our 3 participants today are Mr. Sinha Long, who is a part of the advocacy and partnership manager team at United World Schools in Cambodia. Sinha is currently working on the advocacy and partnership team with UWS Cambodia. He engages in coordination between schools, communities, and governments on strengthening school accountability and governance and promoting inclusive and quality education. In 2022, he worked for NGO Education and disability, non-formal education, teacher and school reforms to exchange ideas, and to advocate on the education policy gaps. He holds a master's degree in English teaching and a bachelor's degree in English for communication, and has an associate's degree in English literature. Welcome, Sena. Our next panelist today is Mr. Anthony Hall, the project lead at Public School Partnerships with the DJ Murray Trust in South Africa, who will be talking to us about the Western Cape Collaboration Schools program in South Africa. Anthony is a grant manager at the DJ Murray Trust and leads its investment into collaboration schools and public school partnerships. He's a financer by trade and loves the intersection between financing, programs, and impact. He has previously worked in the corporate sector in Europe, started an investment fund for South Africa's social enterprises, and worked with an online fundraising platform before starting his journey in basic education with DJ Murray Trust. When not financing social enterprises, he can be found with his wife and 2 small children, or very occasionally exploring South Africa's wilderness areas. I'm wondering why occasionally, Anthony. And the last panelist for today is Mr. Daniel Keasanga. He's the head of quality assurance at Promoting Equality in Africa Schools, PEACE, Uganda. Daniel is the head of quality assurance and system strengthening, having joined PEACE in 2012 as a school inspector and rising to his current role. Before PEACE, he was a school head teacher and inspector in the district local government. With over 20 years of experience in education administration and management, he ensures that all PEACE network schools adhere to the quality standards to fulfill the organization's vision of unlocking every child's potential. His work focuses on creating safe learning environments, improving teaching and learning outcomes. Daniel played a key role in developing PEACE inspection framework and school improvement approach, which is now being used to support 200 government secondary schools, impacting over 1 lakh learners. Welcome, Daniel, Sena, and Anthony. Now, over the next 10 minutes, I would request each panelist to briefly talk about their program and work, share how their project came about, and what are the challenges they faced, particularly in the initial phases of the program. Daniel, can we begin with you?
Yeah, thank you very much. Glad to be here, excited. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. It's afternoon here in Uganda, in East Africa. So I'm Daniel Keasanga from PEACE. PEACE is, of course, a not-for-profit organization. We run a network of secondary schools, 30 in Uganda, 6 in Zambia, proceeding to 8, and we are supporting school improvement initiatives in Ghana. In Uganda, we strongly focus on 4 pillars of impact. This is access, quality, sustainability, and system strengthening. So for me, as Daniel, my great interest with PEACE was the alignment of my passion in education with the PEACE mission and values, strongly opening up access to vulnerable children accessing a secondary education. Most of them would not have this opportunity, but we reach out to those vulnerable, marginalized communities in rural Uganda and rural Zambia. And of course, being collaborative rather than competitive as one of our key values, that was really my key interest with PEACE. And as shared, I've been growing strong to ensure that we live up to our mission of creating opportunities for children to unlock their potential in secondary education. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. Sena, can you go next?
Good afternoon, everyone. So let me just begin with UWS journey, why UWS exists. And at the beginning, we identified that many students are out of schools in the remote communities of Cambodia, and then we realized that why they are out of school, why should not they get in schools. And then from that concept, UWS realized that the public school system does not benefit to those children. So we step up to build a small school where we get those students to enroll in schools. And then we from time to time we expand our programs to reach to other provinces of Cambodia. And then over time our programs also expanded to the other countries as well, like Myanmar, Madagascar, and Nepal. So recently we reached out to 61,000 students across worldwide. And this is a kind of the story of the UWS and our journey in running UWS programs. We focus on three pillars. One is quality education. So we empower children to achieve foundation literacy and numeracy skills in a safe and inclusive environment. So in order to achieve this, we strengthen the capacities of the teachers, and the capacities of the school management committees in order to foster and build up the capacity to be, qualified to run their schools. We also support with the education resource to the students in order for them to have enough materials to study and learn. And we also build schools that are safe and inclusive for students who regardless of their backgrounds can access the schools. So these are the quality pillar that we and interventions that we do to promote the quality education. The second pillar is sustainability. So we strengthen the education systems to sustain the education quality. We collaborate with the local governments to ensure that they are accountable to our own schools, and we empower the local communities in order to build community ownership, where the communities are part of the school to monitor and to lead their own schools. So and the last pillar is scale. We accelerate the access to the quality of education, where we adopt schools and maintain the school maintenance, and as well as we do advocacy, where we work with the local governments and communities and to advocate in order to strengthen the school accountability, where we can share best practice of our programs and lesson learned to improve the school accountability. So this is the focus of our programs, where we would do to ensure the program quality for UWS. Yeah.
Thanks, Sana. Anthony?
Hi, good morning or afternoon, everyone. My name's Anthony. So I represent the DG Murray Trust's Public School Partnership Program here in Cape Town, and particularly what's called collaboration schools here. The story of starting collaboration schools was one in about 2015, where both some influential players in one of our province's education department, the Western Cape Education Department, as well as a collective of somewhat unrelated funders were all ended up convalescing about wanting to do something meaningful in education here. I don't think I have to introduce all the challenges that all of us developing world folks deal with education, particularly for our poorest 70% of children here in South Africa. And there was a determination that it had to be in the public school sector, because that's where those 70% of children are located, and where we need to support. We recognize that you can't ask people to do things more smartly or more differently or any different way if you don't give them more help, more capacity, and if you don't give them more flexibility in how they do their things, and in fact hold people accountable for supporting one another. So the big change that came about through collaboration schools was a new model of employing teachers and allowing the schools themselves to employ the teachers instead of being education department teachers. And that had the advantage that those schools were then able to recruit differently. They were able to reconfigure their posts differently according to the context they were in. They could performance manage those teachers differently. And then the other part was, of course, to start playing an employer role, those schools needed capacity. And so we partnered the schools with non-profit, non-state groups, non-profit organizations, who would join the school governing bodies of these schools. South Africa has a rather unique legislative environment where schools are governed by, the school governing body is given quite a large number of both governance and management roles in a school, and the law also stipulates who exactly should be on those school governing bodies. And coming out of the 1994 turn to democracy and the end of apartheid here in South Africa, those were designed very much to try and bring communities and be more inclusive in how schools were managed. And ultimately, we always said that this had to be rooted in learner outcomes. The adults can design as many processes and frameworks as the adults want to, but these interventions always have to land and be proven in outcomes for children.
Yep, you're right. Great. So now, because this panel's primary focus is to, in a way, develop perspective on how to initiate and sustain good partnerships with the government, I'd request each of you to, briefly talk about the factors that you considered before embarking on your specific partnership with the government. From your perspective, what should other non-state actors focus on when initiating partnerships with the government to ensure that the collaboration is successful and, as Anthony said, the focus remains on the outcomes and not just putting in place a process? Should we begin with you, Daniel? Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you very much. In Uganda, at PEACE, of course, like I said earlier, we have a network of 30 schools. So this gives us opportunity to test whatever is good. You identify what you are strong at, what is your niche, and then you compare with what is out there, and you navigate and scan the secondary education space. So we were so fortunate that we are given an opportunity, for example, to work with the district local government. When we started, we have our internal supervisor and supervision and support structures. So we started inviting them to come into our schools. So while coming in, for example, conducting school inspection exercises, support supervision, really to see what we are doing and check compliance and so on. And then while working with them, we could get this feedback. They give you feedback around the gaps out there. They could give you share feedback around your key strengths, and then give you an experience of what is happening there. What if you come out here and support this other school and so on? So in that way, you really flag up what you are strong at, and then what is the gap out there. And whatever intervention we are going to take out. In Uganda, for example, we started with our school inspection approach, which was so strong. And then when we got these district local governments, they said, oh, how come you do a whole day inspection? And, they had this approach of fault finding, a tick off kind of approach where you tick off facilities in the school, how many washrooms, whatever. So you're like, no, we have to go and sit in the classroom, observe lessons, take off time to give a teacher feedback. So they identified such approaches as, oh, it's something that you could really bring forward and show us how you really do that. So you have to consider those gaps and whether they feed in, your intervention feeds in appropriately with the state actors' need. So that's you start these small conversations, then you take them up. By the time you reach the decision makers, you've softened your foundation. You have a backup, force behind you. That sure, we've experienced it. It's good. It's ready to go. So open up what you are doing for others to give you feedback. Don't close your space. Open up. Feel free. Often in the education space, sometimes we are so competitive. You don't want others to see what you are doing. And to me, that is really quite bad. So you open up, you realize what you have to feed into the other. So for us, it was not about the children in the Peace Network that matter, but it was also the children out there. So living true to our vision, to our mission, that we have to reach out. We are not competitive. Let's share these learnings. I think they work and so on. So, and then you identify those other opportunities that are out there with the state actors, to really feed in. You really have to approach it from a very flexible, flexible way. You don't need to really be rigid, but most important, be ready to listen and get feedback and avoid imposing and ensuring that what you are doing is a priority to the other end and it is contributing to what Anthony called better learning outcomes as a whole, and provide the evidence of what you've tested. Give them evidence. You can have the opportunity to pilot it such that they observe and see. Give them the opportunity to lead in there, to assess. Give them opportunity to compare. Don't block any space in there. You open it up, and then and be available for the feedback. So for us, those were the key factors of starting this strong partnership with the state actors.
Thanks a lot, Daniel. A lot of insight back there. Sena, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. So what factor do we make the partnership? As I mentioned earlier, that we focus on children out of school. We identify the local needs and what are the needs, and specifically the students who are out of school. So in order to identify the local needs, we collaborate with the provincial and district government to identify the communities where there's no school that accessible for the students. So we work with the local governments to identify the communities that don't have the schools, and we evaluate the needs that exist there. Then specifically number of students, number of children that are out of school. So the majority students that are out of school, that's a big need that we anticipate to make a partnership. And the second point is we reach out to the local authorities and the communities to conduct what we call a survey, where we identify those needs. So we cross-check between the surveys that we conducted in the community and the data that we receive from the government, and then we cross-check those data to to analyze the needs at the community, and that's how we start to make a partnership with the government and local communities before we start to build a school. And so once we establish the partnership, and then we start to build schools in the school building process, we mobilize the community resource where the communities have to play and contribute in the school building. So the community where we work with, they are very poor. They don't have budget to support the school running. But what they can contribute is the community labor. So the community, we coordinate the community to gather a group of a number of groups of people where they can join to build the school, and this is how the community can contribute to the school building. And after we build schools, and then UWS have support the school operations in order to get the students to access the school. But the key lesson learned we found out is that there's a lack of stakeholders' responsibility to support the schools once they're running. We just okay, now we build the schools, but then what exactly the communities, the local governments, district and provincial governments would do to support the school running? So we haven't discussed the clear responsibilities with those stakeholders, and this is the big issue. And I think if we want to build a partnership, we got to understand, we got to discuss the clear role and responsibilities of each stakeholder, so that they can help support the schools to ensure the sustainable schools. Yeah, that is a kind of a key lesson learned, and something that I would suggest once we build a partnership, and we should be aware of that either. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sina. We will come back to this bit about, maintaining the stakeholder interest in sustaining quality. But Anthony, can I have your thoughts on this?
Sure. I suppose our experience was we were in the lucky position that government and a group of funders were on the same page at the beginning. It wasn't a government RFP with a predetermined program, and it also wasn't an outside group forcing a solution on government. And that's would be my first recommendation, is you've just got to be really clear when advocating to government that you're offering something that talks to what government's needs are and what government's priorities are. You've got to be helping them. Then where we were there, we were in I guess a window of political opportunity, that there was this opportunity now to get started and to pilot and to test. And I'll always take action over analysis paralysis. So at some point you got to get going, but there's also an expression that says if you're broadly aligned, you probably aren't. And so the other piece of advice would be collaboration is hard, but to do the work up front of testing with schools, districts, provincial government, what are the needs? What, as Sina said, what do you need? Okay, what do you really need? Okay, what would need to be true for that solution to work? Okay, how would you experience that? And then in fact start again and go, right, now let's test where we've got to. How would that work with you? In our case, where we've had more challenge is figuring out those roles and responsibilities, the details of the roles and responsibilities when the work really hits schools. Maybe we could have smoothed a better pathway for ourselves if we'd kind of workshop through to that level. Who will be in charge of what? Who won't be in charge of what? Who will be accountable for what, and so on. I think that those were some of our early learning setting off.
Wonderful, Anthony. Thanks. I'm going to break the order here now a little bit, and I'm going to ask Sina first. So Sina, what do you think? Because you were just saying that, it is very difficult to sustain the interest and commitment of the government once the school is up and running. And at UWS, of the 136 schools in Cambodia, you have transitioned 40 schools last year, and you plan to transition a further 26 schools this year. So what are the things that you have in mind when you do this? How are you able to ensure the government maintains its commitment and interest?
Yeah, let me start. Just tell you more about UWS. So we build the schools and support school operation within 5 to 7 years, and we transition the schools to the government. That is our sustainable approach. Once we transition our schools to the government and make sure that the schools that have been transitioned to the government are accountable and by the schools and local governments. We in order to to ensure that school has been sustainable, what we have been done is one focus is we run our programs to ensure the quality of our programs, and we do train enhance the capacities of the teachers and the school leaderships team, and we mobilize the community engagement to make sure that the community are engaged and support the schools once they're running. And we also strengthen the local government's responsibility to ensure that they can contribute to the school development. And this is the activities that we have done, and in order to ensure the sustainable school. But as I mentioned earlier, that because we haven't started at early on as clear as possible, and that's why there's a lack of responsibilities between each stakeholders, and this is something that we have found after we transitioned 40 schools, as you mentioned, and then we did a survey to evaluate this transition impact. So what we found out is that there's a lack of the teachers' capacity gap. There's a lack of resource to support the school. There's a lack of or community engagement to support the school, and the last one is the school maintenance is not is one of the issues, because as I just let you know that most of our schools are built by wood. So once we transition the schools, and those schools still remain broken along the way, and this is something this is the gap that we found out when we conduct the survey, and therefore, if I think this is a lesson learned for UWS to improve our program as well. So when we make a partnership, we got to discuss with our relevant stakeholders to discuss the TR or clear role responsibilities, to especially to address the gaps that we found out based on our survey, make sure that those gaps have been addressed early on, so that once we transition to schools, we can ensure that those schools could be sustainable. And yeah, that's a key lesson learned, and we want to improve our programs based on our evaluation and that we have been gone through.
After transitioning, will you continue to evaluate whether the transition has
been... After we transition 40 schools, and then we evaluate those 40 schools, how successful the schools are running after we we transitioned. And as the survey, we found that there's some significant gaps at the school levels where the stakeholders are not address those gaps. So we therefore want when we make a partnership to build new schools, those are the gaps, significant gaps that we would address early on, to make sure that there are clear responsibilities of each stakeholders to address that gaps. Yeah.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah.
Daniel, in Uganda, you've built partnerships through your secondary schools network. So how did you translate, the strategy and design from the private school network to a public partnership with the government? What were the adjustments that you have to make? And like you were saying, when you approached the schools and you worked on a day-long inspect and improve program in which not only observations were made, but there was time set aside for feedback provided to the teachers. So what has your experience been in scaling this up to 200 public schools across 69 districts?
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, with our approach, like I said earlier, that you must identify your area where you are really strong and provide evidence. You don't go out there to share where you are weak, because you'll be questioned, your strength will be questioned. So from within, from our school network, having tested our school improvement approach, how we support school leaders to take ownership of the school improvement process, how to utilize school-based data to inform decisions, and then observing the transformation they make in the quality of leadership, in the support and supervision of the teams, and then finally the learning outcomes of the students. Over the years, we saw enrollment improve, so we are confident enough to go external to share with partners. So likewise, we started off with schools, with the schools that were near the Peace schools, the public schools that were near the Peace schools. Like you start really small, support your neighbor to get better. Then that neighbor will share your story with another neighbor, and with the public space, the story went on and went on and went on. So before we knew, we are like a reference point. So we used like the school leaders, the public secondary school leaders themselves to tell our story. And that became easier for us because they experienced the impact. In one of the schools, for example, that had never gotten in first grade for almost 10 years, that was a public secondary school. When we intervened with the Inspect and Improve program, just supporting the head teacher on how you sit in a class, how do you identify the qualities of a great lesson? What are the indicators? How do you support a teacher to improve? How do you engage them without holding them to fault? You didn't do this, forgetting the negative language, build on their key strengths. And over the years and months, they realized the improvements so the teachers were making. Even the learners getting excited in their own lessons as they attended, attendance for lessons, attendance for school improved, holding the learners more to be responsible by themselves, but doing away with the corporal punishment, assault, and so on, talking to them, guiding, and so on. So they saw these changes, they were visible. So the story was easy to share. And for us, that was a great win. When we engaged the government, especially the Directorate of Education Standards, that we have the opportunity for scaling, are you ready, and so on. They received us with open hand, smiling. Yeah, sure, Daniel, this is great. We can move on. We are ready because we've heard your story. So you let the customer own it. Let them enjoy the journey. You walk alongside them, be vulnerable a bit. Accept where you are not so good, and appreciate and give them the solutions. Be available to when they need you. For example, there's a head teacher who reached to me and told me, Daniel, I don't know how to manage even a CPD or a staff meeting, a professional development. How do I approach it? You give time, because you are out there to support. Don't do a light touch. Be ready to move in and support them such that they feel your support. They enjoy the journey. They experience the impact, the results, and then they'll share the happiness with you. So that becomes so easier. So as of now, they don't look at us as competitors because we run parallel private secondary schools, but they look at us as colleagues who are moving together on a journey. And I tell you, when you reach out to the higher central government secondary education department at the central level, you let them tell your story. You don't, you come along them, they'll tell your story because there is that experience they've enjoyed. Key adjustments, of course, you have to be very flexible and patient, because these external partners, you have to release some of your approaches on how to hold people accountable and so on, because these are partners. One unique experience is that you cannot hold them too accountable because they don't report to you, but you build that relationship where they feel ashamed when they don't fulfill a promise, where they feel that self-accountability that, Daniel, I'm sorry, I didn't get there in my school improvement target, but this is what I'm doing about it. And, you support them, hold the hand, and then they work together. You work together. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Daniel. You are anticipating handover of the program to the government in 2026. So all the best with that, and hope it continues to remain as heavy touch and as deep even after handing over.
Sure, we're excited about it.
Anthony, while you were speaking, you were talking about, how you have the school governing bodies which comprise of the local communities and the parents, and you then were initially you were facing challenges in the collaboration schools to ensure the representation of the school operating partners in it. So how did you overcome these challenges, and how did you manage there could be a fear of privatization, or like when you are doing, you were saying that, to find out what you really need and to focus on the learning outcomes, you get tests done and standardized tests done. How do you overcome the resistance and the fear against that from the school governing bodies?
Thanks. And I mean, the fear was probably as much outside the school governing bodies and teaching staff and broader communities and advocacy groups. Yeah. And so again, in our change, we were changing the standard composition of a school governing body compared to public schools in the rest of the country. And of course, change is intimidating, and one always wants to think through what are the risks of that. And sure, there was a thought that this could be an effort to, in fact, take over those forums, take over the management, and then even the word privatization came in. Originally, in fact, when in the original workshops, we were going to have 51% control of the school governing body so that managerial control really could be exerted. And in fact, talking to communities, talking to teachers, talking to parents, we changed tactic and we went for a 50-50 split, and where the parents still had the majority vote. And that probably stood us in better stead. I think we did get better buy-in in some of the early pilots because of exactly that. It was easier to navigate some of the legal challenges that got sent our way. Probably the things we did really well up front is we made it really clear that these schools should be non-selective schools. Because of course, as soon as there are any profit incentives anywhere, it is really tempting to just pick your students and pick your teachers, and you can get any results you want. So we said, absolutely, these schools must be non-selective schools like any other government school that take the first 100 kids, and that's your group, number one. And the law didn't require us to, but as funders, we said we will only fund no-fee schools. And that just absolutely and categorically could put the lid on that concern, because there is quite literally no money changing hands, so that we could just be really clear that we're chasing quality and not introducing any potential commercial interests or resource type interests. What we've only done better in the latter years was then in the operating partners having an influence in the managerial running of schools. I think I mentioned the roles and responsibilities. I think there was some lack of clarity about the idea, is the operating partner in charge on a day-to-day basis or on a month-to-month basis or just on a governance basis? Does the principal report to the government or does the principal report to the operating partner? And we had a lot of ideas around that, but I think the lack of real crystal clarity certainly aggravated some contentions in the early days. And then maybe lastly, an idea that we've just been exploring recently is when you're setting out on something that's new, you're asking people to trust people, and you're asking people to trust people at every level, from the junior staff room to principal and the operating to the junior government to senior government. And people trusting people is really hard. Let's be honest. And there's always a power dynamic. There's always a pay professional dynamic, an age dynamic, a race dynamic. And you can get that right, but it can be very hit and miss. And what we found now is once you start getting results and results that people can trust, you start to find parents saying, I trust the product. I trust that school. I know that school will be good for my child, and I don't need to build an individual irreplaceable trust with one other individual on the other side of the fence. And I think maybe the last thing I'd say is it's really helpful to think through how you're going to communicate those results. And different forums are going to need to hear different things, whether it's funders, government. Some people are going to want to see randomized control trials and results in standard deviations and peer-reviewed articles and so on. Other groups are going to want to just see academic scores go up 5% or 10%. And then, in fact, that's important, we think, but not to underestimate the power of a parent who gets into somebody's car after a meeting and turns to somebody and says, I don't have to send my child out of this community anymore to get a quality education at that fancy school. My child can get quality at the school. And that can be as compelling in one's program as all the fancy measures.
Do you also have a mechanism to communicate the results and improvements to the parents, or?
Interesting. So I guess results have come in different forms in different timelines. So we've got 3 or 4 high schools where the matric or the school leaver results absolutely speak for themselves, and those parents now are our champions. We don't have to do any more work there. They are now demanding those programs. In some of the intermediate grades, we've got some fantastic results, but not consistently so. That then would come down to a school by school type strategy. So different operating partners will be communicating different things. Some schools will be right on the verge of real excellence. Some schools will just be getting out of really bad results and into something with some promise, and that's a different way to message. So I think, again, one's got to empower each school and each kind of cluster to be able to tell their own story.
Wonderful. Thanks, Anthony. All right, we have a lot of questions from the attendees, and we have very little time left. So I'm going to just throw up a few questions, and any of you can volunteer to answer them. I'm also going to bunch a few similar questions together. So we have a question from Travis Ning from Guatemala, wherein he asks that one challenge we have is that every 4 years, a new presidential administration comes in and abandons everything that the previous president did. This means that we have to restart all public partnership efforts every 4 years. How have you built these partnerships to endure political changes? Similarly, Priyanka, I'm guessing from India, her question is, one of the points we have heard is that policymakers often express concern about the time-bound nature of NGO projects. We have this thing in India wherein the MOUs with the government are signed for an 11-month period, and then you have to keep renewing them every year. So any advice on how non-state actors can address this potential challenge and improve collaboration with policymakers? Any one of you can go.
I can support on the first one. Yeah, I think the political leadership changes, like when they happen, they do away with all that they have to restart Was it something around that? Yeah.
Yeah, so every new person who comes in is not really interested in all the initiatives made by the previous person and wants the self to start something new that they can claim that we put this in place.
Sure. Now, that's why you have to build a strong foundation. You must really have a base that will defend your program, your intervention. So, of course, these changes are going to happen, and we cannot run away from them. But have you got a basis, a foundation that is going to tell your story? That please, this is good. We can't avoid to throw it away. We are really excited to continue with this. A team that is going to tell that story of what has been happening, the impact it has done, or it has had on the in the quality of education, what they have experienced. That is very important. That's why it is really critical that you start with the foundation in the school themselves. Then you gradually take it to the top at every level. If you start at the school, then bring a cluster of schools. Let them appreciate the intervention. From the cluster, move on to the district. From the district, move on to the neighboring region to share your story. And before you know it, even when they change your cars, somebody will be in there, because at one point there is that alignment that we must improve learning outcomes. Who's the beneficiary of all this intervention? Are we improving the quality of education? What has it? What is the impact? Have we the impact we've experienced? Can we document what we are doing and the impact stories, such that when this challenge occurs, it's all there. The evidence is all there. So you've got that strong foundation to keep it going, regardless of the changes at the top level. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. The next question is from Dan Omaya, when they ask, what defines partnerships when government and partner priorities are misaligned? For example, the government priority is to be funded, while the partner's priority is to improve the system. I'm guessing people are hesitant to take this.
I can give it a go. Thanks very much, Daniel. My name's yeah, of course, that misalignment can happen, but you must be truthful. You must be truthful, because you cannot always get it your way. At one point, you might disagree on the priorities and so on, and that's where it becomes very important for you to align. Don't take. You have to scan the workspace. You know, what is the need? What is the need? Is what you are taking out there a priority on the other end? And often the challenge we get as non-government organization or non-state actors is when we take to the state something that is not a priority to them. You'll never get any attention, because you are running parallel, you are moving parallel ways. So you must scan the space. Is it what I'm taking fitting in their priority need? How is it going to create impact? How is it going to be scalable? And try to make sure that you are contributing to that gap that they are trying to really patch up, and identify your critical role in there. For us, that was important. You really have to be careful what you are taking out there, whether it really fits in their priorities. There, you'll get it going. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Anthony Sinha, what are your strategies for once you are handing over to the government? And is there an exit plan that you have? And once you stop working in a particular school, how do you ensure sustenance of the program that you have put in place once the government takes over its operations completely?
I mean, maybe I'll go next. We're probably on the other end of the spectrum to Daniel. We feel like we've just got to the point where we've proved that it works, and now we're just starting. Well, you know, how would it be adopted at scale by government? But I think what we've also found is early days. I think we had lots of well, some hit and miss, some failed schools, some success schools. We're starting to get the predictability better and better now. We're also learning that these things take time. You know, looking at our early project, would we like to be further down the track by now with more participation by government? Absolutely. But if I showed you where we are now today in 2016, would you say, wow, this is a big, bold thing and this is worthwhile getting behind? I think everyone would say yes. And sorry, the other part of the question was how to hand over to government. So I think what we're also finding is as the operators are so-called getting it right, they're able to start, like in a sense, putting their schools on what they're calling a graduate model, a lighter touch model. When you go into a school initially, if let's say 60% of the teachers have never seen examples of good coaching or good practice or good culture and discipline, it is really hard to bring the school organizationally along. Once 90% of the teachers have lived it and breathed it for 2 or 3 years, the support that you need to add on top can get less and less. I think in our case, we haven't, well, we still think that's a measure of support is going to be required in perpetuity, but we're busy exploring, you know, what that can look like at scale, and perhaps it's much more a graduate model, you know, looking after, you know, programs that become teenagers and adults rather than the high intensity infant stage.
Thank you, Anthony. Sena, do you want to add anything to that?
Yes. So when we transition to school, we want to ensure that schools are sustainable. And what we would do is to focus on the advocacy work to address the lack of responsibilities of each of relevant stakeholders in order to ensure the school accountability. So as I mentioned earlier, there's some lack of responsibilities of our relevant stakeholders. Therefore there's left remained some of the significant gaps at the school levels. So those significant gaps are something that we will advocate in order to for the relevant stakeholders to help to fix that, you know, gaps. So we will organize a number of workshops and events with the governments where we'll address that issues to the relevant governments, including the communities and the schools, in order for them to be part of the solutions for those gaps. And of course, the other thing that I want to mention is that not schools we have schools that have been successful, and so that's something that we develop the good stories from successful schools where they can share and reinforce and to share best practice and lesson learned where the other schools can learn from them as well. We have, for example, there some schools they are good at mobilizing community resources to support their own schools, and they do the fundraising, school fundraising, where they can raise fund from the communities to support the school. And they, you know, in order to raise fund, there's much of an approach that they can use, but one of the strategy that I like from the experience from the school is that they present the plan and the school needs, and then ask the communities, if you want your child to have a better education, there's some needs that we have, that the communities have to contribute. Like, for example, the schools, they don't have enough learning resource, student resource. So if the community want their students to learn better, they got to invest on school resource to support the students, make sure that they got textbooks and learning resource so that they can learn better. So there's communities started to feel interested and contribute that resource to support the schools. So this is a story that we can use to to share with other schools so that they can learn from the good success and good practice so that they can use and to help develop their own school as well. Yeah, this is something that we have been focusing on on the advocacy in order to address the gaps and reinforce the school engagement and school support for their own school.
Thank you very much, Sena, Anthony, Daniel. Before I summarize the key takeaways, I just want to tell all the attendees that we'll just launch a short poll as we wind up, and it will be very good if you can answer that poll. This has been a wonderful session for me. I've been taking everything in, so might not be able to summarize well. But yeah, one of the takeaways is that, as Daniel said, identify the local needs. Don't have a prefix solution. A lot of times we make the mistake of having a hammer in our hand and think that all the solution to all the challenges are nails, and all that we need is the hammer that we have. So yeah, it's important to be flexible. It's important to build a good relationship with the community. Like Anthony said, sometimes the choice is between speed and quality. And when you start, it is possible that initially you might face a few difficulties, but you have to learn from them and focus on sustaining quality rather than just scaling up. Give the evidence to the schools. Like all three have iterated that once you give the evidence of success, then the parents become your brand ambassadors, the schools become brand ambassadors and speak to other schools, the ambassadors for your solution. And that, I think, is the way for a program to, find more acceptance in the government schooling system. And finally, the things that we need to focus on are access, quality, and sustainability, like all three of you have mentioned. So thank you very much. And I hope that this panel discussion has been beneficial to everybody. We had to miss out on a lot of questions. Questions asked by Darsha, Gautam, Bansi. Hopefully, the panelists will read them once this discussion is over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Chirag, and all the panelists. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to the audience for your patient listening. I hope you learned a lot and had a lot of takeaways. For the questions that we could not answer, I will try to get them to the panelists so that we can get you some answers. Please do answer the poll that has now been launched, and then you can drop off. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.